Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin in the Yukon, where the RCMP says it's monitoring foreign interests that could compromise Arctic security. There's growing concerns that foreign governments could be interfering in the Canadian North. Julian Dignac has more.
Shady investments into mining or road projects from numbered Chinese companies, cyber criminals fleecing First Nations elders of their money. Those are a few examples of potential security threats. The Yukon RCMP won't confirm whether there are any active investigations, but Superintendent Lindsay Ellis says the territory is vulnerable.
The Yukon has the largest land border with the United States that's unmanned. The distance between ports of entry that are the responsibility of CBSA, of the Canadian Border Services Agency, and that unmanned part, that's the responsibility of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It's vast, it's huge. Is that a challenge? Yes.
The Senate is considering a bill that, if passed, would ensure more scrutiny of certain investments, especially those that could jeopardize national security. Yukon Senator Pat Duncan says it's high time. That's because investments in critical minerals needed for renewable energy projects are booming.
It's important that ownership be, once resources are developed, that the ownership be Canadian. Well, it's not only the investments. It's also the post the development. We want to be sure that, well, we want to be certain that everybody's following the law that are set out for the development, and we want to ensure that there is, should there be an issue of some kind, like if the cleanup has to be also taken care of.
The Yukon government has assembled a team of experts to head its Arctic Security Council. Chair Ken Coates recently said a central focus is how foreign entities are after critical minerals. Julian Dignac, CBC News, Whitehorse.
You may be familiar with the ATIP system. That's access to information and privacy protection. It's a tool for members of the public to access records from public bodies. That could be meeting minutes, emails, or documents about family members who've died. But getting that information can be slow. And the Northwest Territories Information and Privacy Commissioner said his office has been getting more public complaints about delays. The CBC's Natalie Pressman has been asking about this and looking into this issue. She joins me now with more. So, Natalie, what have you been hearing about the ATIP system?
Well, I'll just start by saying that when we talk about the system, what we're talking about is the Access and Privacy Office. So that's an arm of the government that sort of stick handles these requests. And I spoke with the Information and Privacy Commissioner, Andrew Fox. He's independent of that office. And I also spoke with Kevin O'Reilly, a former MLA, and Cabin Radio journalist Emily Blake. They all talked about how important the ATIP system is. The problem is that the process can be really slow. O'Reilly says that he has one request that's been outstanding for 7 months. And just to give a sense of how long that is, the legislation on this says that the public body has 20 days to respond to the applicant. And there are processes to extend that 20-day time frame, and often it does get extended. But, 20 days to 7 months, that is a discrepancy.
Do we know why there's such a long delay?
Well, there's sort of two things that kept coming up when I asked people that question. One was a lack of staff at the office, and the other was sort of this culture of opaqueness within the government. Here's what Kevin O'Reilly had to say about that.
Access to information is not high as a government priority, quite frankly, and they haven't really put a lot of time and effort into it, even though GNWT says that it has an open government policy. They've done not very much to actually implement that and develop a culture of open government within the civil service.
So you mentioned that you spoke with the Privacy and Information Commissioner. What did he have to say about these delays?
Well, as we were saying just a little bit earlier, when someone submits an ATIP, the public body has 20 days to reply. If they need more time, they can grant themselves a 20-day extension. And then if they need more time after that, they need to get permission from the Privacy Commissioner for that extension. So Andrew Fox is the commissioner. He says he's actually seeing fewer requests for extensions from the government, but it's not because they're completing all these files on time. He says he's actually getting more complaints from the public about delays.
And the reason I think that that's going on is because The Access Privacy Office, which is, fielding all this work for the government departments, is overwhelmed with its work, and it is having an ever-increasing difficulty, it seems, in meeting the deadlines. And I think what it's choosing to do is focus its efforts on actually doing the work for the responses rather than going through the procedural piece of asking us for time to do that.
That's something Emily Blake, the Cabin Radio reporter, has experienced firsthand. She says it's pretty concerning to see the government breaking its own rules. And so when that happens, the applicant can ask the privacy commissioner for a review. That typically leads to the commissioner ordering the public body to respond. But Blake says that she's been through that process and still not gotten a response from the office. So at that point, the only enforcement option is for the applicant to bring that case to the NWT Supreme Court.
What about the Access and Privacy Office itself? What does it have to say about these delays?
Well, the office said that they were pretty busy completing the request, so none of the staff could be available for an interview. But in an email, a spokesperson confirmed that they are short-staffed. At full capacity, they would have 5 people working, but they have 2 vacancies right now, and one of those has been open for the last 7 months. So they explained that this work takes time. It's coordinating with the applicant and it's coordinating with the government department. It involves going through many pages of records, sometimes thousands of pages, line by line. And the office also acknowledged that they weren't always asking for extensions because they did want to expedite the process, which is what we heard from the commissioner too.
Okay, so in all of this research, the conversations you had, did you hear any suggestions about how the office could do better?
Well, other than filling those vacancies that we are just talking about, Blake, the Cabin Radio journalist, made the point that if they don't have enough staff to meet their own laws, the territory is obligated to hire more people. She and Kevin O'Reilly both made another suggestion that if the government were to be more transparent in disclosing information to the public in the first place, there would be fewer requests and less strain on the system. Similar to O'Reilly's comments that we heard earlier, that's something Andrew Fox, the commissioner, says needs to come from the top.
The policy signals from the top seem to be in support of access to information. But I think that there are certainly pockets where that is not necessarily embraced. And if there isn't a really good leadership on valuing access to information and as a fundamental function of government, as opposed to being an annoying add-on, it can slow things down quite a bit.
So his suggestion ultimately is for the government culture to live up to its own claims of transparency.
Okay, lots to talk about there. Thank you so much for all of your work on this, Natalie.
Thank you.
Some expectant mothers in the Inuvik region are suddenly being told they have to go to Yellowknife to give birth. The NWT Health Authority says labor and delivery services are suspended until Sunday, starting today. That's due to an unexpected reduction in obstetrics staff. Anyone in the region who is 36 weeks or more into their pregnancy will be sent to Yellowknife to have their baby. The authority says fewer than 5 people are affected. Those who are under 36 weeks pregnant are not expected to be impacted. It is the 25th anniversary of the Junior Canadian Rangers this weekend. Kuujjuaq Nunavik will be hosting the national celebration, and they're expecting a very special guest to attend the party. The guest of honor will be Governor General Mary Simon. Military personnel and dignitaries are arriving in Kuujjuaq today. They'll be joined by more than 80 Canadian junior cadets representing every Canadian province and territory. Major Alexander Gordon is a deputy commanding officer with the Canadian Rangers. He says there'll be lots to keep the young cadets busy.
We're having different competitions, improvised shelter, they're doing slingshot shooting, dog sledding, ice fishing. These are activities for the junior rangers, but we encourage anyone from the community to come and cheer them on, to encourage them, and to interact with all the activities that we're conducting.
Simon has a packed agenda in Nunavik. Tomorrow, she'll watch the cadet competition and visit the Iswa Civic Regional Recovery Center and the Tusaiapik Elders Home. Then she'll have dinner with the cadets and an evening of cultural entertainment. On Saturday, Simon will speak at the ceremony commemorating the 25th anniversary. He has had a huge impact on his culture in the Beaufort Delta, and now Steve Cockney Sr. is being thanked with a big award. Des Loreen has more on the Tuktoyaktuk elder and his passion for Northern Games.
Okay, good luck everybody, have fun. Remember, shake hands after you're done.
Steve Cockney Sr. is all about respect. His work in the Northern Games has earned him a top honor, the annual Elders Award from the NWT Rec and Parks Association. Cockney says the award came as a surprise.
I've done a lot of talk shows and interviews with people, and it's something that I'm familiar with, but with this one here, it's kind of unique because it's something that I really didn't expect.
The award was given to Cockney because of his dedication. Cockney competed in the Northern Games as a youth and now coaches others.
He's got such an infectious passion for what he does, and you know that somewhere there's a kid in Inuvik or in the region who's just captivated in the way that he was when he was a child, and is going to be Steve Cockney, 50 years from now.
Cockney will be presented with the award later this year. He continues to coach Northern Games at the Community Corporation office every week. Des Loreen, CBC News, Inuvik.
How can any of this be fair?
Now you might think, hey, we just need more doctors, but that's not really it.
A Russian scheme here
shows you where it starts, where it ends.
Were you really willing to risk that job?
Yes.
At Thunder Bay's favorite festival, Wake the Giant.
Ta-da! There it is.
That same woman from the SEC keeps calling. Can I give her your number?
No.
Michael Lazaridis, want to come and answer some questions?
Why is the SEC looking at us?
I'm sure it's nothing. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how you convinced all these engineers from around the world to come all the way to Canada. Do you know what the sentence is for multi-million-dollar stock fraud?
It doesn't matter how full of people your house is as long as it's full of love. Now today is not about the future, it's not about the past, it's about this moment.
You can't go halfway with Swan Lake.
There's a lot of stress.
I love ballet, and sometimes it feels like it doesn't love me back.
The stakes become very high.
We're just trying to survive right now.
Some people rise and some people don't.
The Great Canadian Baking Show is back.
And the winner is...
Alan, no, it's too soon for that.
How about now?
Give me that.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Longtime New Democratic Party leader Ed Broadbent has died. First elected to Parliament in 1968, he led the federal NDP for 14 years. He always insisted that he was an ordinary Canadian representing other ordinary Canadians. Hannah Thibodeau has more on his legacy.
He was the type of politician Canadians felt they knew on a first-name basis. Ed Broadbent first ran for the NDP in 1968. He became leader in 1975. He moved the NDP to the left, and the NDP moved up in the polls. The 1988 election was a campaign fought over free trade, and it pushed Broadbent's NDP to the brink of a breakthrough.
Canadians are not about to build a Canada on the values of John Turner's vision of Bay Street as a replacement for Brian Mulroney's Wall Street.
Opinion polls prior to the election suggested the party was surging. At the time, Broadbent became the most successful NDP leader in history, with 43 seats. But he fell short of his own high hopes. There had been an expectation the NDP would at least become official opposition.
After an election, I sit down and I am with my wife here, and we think of what is good in terms of our personal life, what is good for my party, and what is good for my country.
The next year, Broadbent stepped down as leader. But his political career wasn't over just yet. After more than a decade outside of the House of Commons, he was lured back by Jack Layton.
Who's back? Ed is back. Say what?
And he reintroduced himself to a new generation of voters with a rap video.
It's time for voting, NDP.
And won a seat for the NDP in Ottawa.
If Jack Layton hadn't made a certain phone call last November, it wouldn't have happened.
In 2005, he announced he wouldn't seek re-election. He wanted to care for his wife, Lucille, who died of breast cancer in 2006. In 2011, he helped establish a political think tank aimed at exploring social democratic ideas, bearing his name, the Broadbent Institute. The NDP continued to turn to Broadbent for advice about the party he devoted so much of his life to. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
Some Algonquin leaders want to explore legal action after a controversial radioactive waste site got approval to be built near the Ottawa River. The site is located in Chalk River, and it's faced fierce pushback over environmental concerns. As Celeste DeCare reports, many local Indigenous groups aren't ready to give up just yet.
Nearly all of the federally recognized Algonquin First Nations in Ontario and Quebec have opposed the construction of Canadian Nuclear Laboratories' waste site. When the radioactive disposal facility got approval earlier this week, it didn't come as a total shock to some leaders.
They always knew they wanted to do this, and they were going to do it with or without us.
The disappointment stems from the overall consultation process.
Very, very, very disappointed, but really, quite honestly, not surprised.
And they claim there was a bias with how the radioactive waste site got approval.
You have two organizations who want to put nuclear waste there, and they're the only two that are approving it.
It also comes down to the potential environmental impact. The Chalk River site is located about 1 kilometer from the Ottawa River. A final report from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission said the facility isn't likely to cause significant harm to the environment. An expert consulted on the project isn't convinced.
All radioactive materials are carcinogenic. And generally speaking, the idea of allowing carcinogenic materials to enter into drinking water by a matter of decision by a government body is not really acceptable.
Canadian Nuclear Laboratories says they're aware of the concerns.
And we fully intend to meet all the commitments that we've made to them and continue to offer them an opportunity to be involved in the project in the manner that they choose to do so.
Haymond and White Duck say their legal teams are looking at what can be done now to appeal this decision.
And the Algonquins, we're going to be here for, we've been here from the very beginning, and we're going to be here for the next millennial for another 1,000,000 years. So it's not over yet.
At this stage, the Chalk River site is approved for construction, but it's not yet been authorized to put any radioactive waste into it. A construction date has not been set. Celeste DeCare, CBC News, Ottawa.
NHL players are among the fittest people on the planet, but that doesn't guarantee mental health. Now, a new initiative is trying to make sure hockey players and their families get the support they need. The CBC's Katie Nicholson has that story.
Corey Hirsch gets ready to soak up the sun on the slopes, but during his NHL career, the former goalie was often in a much darker place.
It was pure hell, to be honest.
Hirsch detailed his struggles with mental health and a suicide attempt in a book 2 years ago.
The game itself wasn't the issue. The issue was the stigma attached to it. You know, the stigma of of having to be, this tough man.
As more NHL players are starting to open up about the mental health challenges they face on and off the ice, its Players Association has launched First Line, a peer training program.
The program aims to really increase the knowledge about common mental health issues, things like depression, anxiety, addiction, self-harm.
Certainly we see this as a catalyst moment in focusing on and getting it right for our membership.
So far, more than 20 players from 5 teams have taken the training. They wear this pin so players know they're a safe space, someone they can turn to and start the conversation.
We're opening a door that hasn't been opened before.
Blake Wheeler, who currently plays for the New York Rangers, took the training after opening up about his own struggles with mental health.
The more willingness I had to get help and to talk to people and have conversations, the better my relationship with it became.
I wish it was available when I played. Maybe I would have had a much longer career, and maybe I wouldn't have gone through the things that I went through.
Hirsch says the program's fantastic, but needs to expand to make a real difference.
But it needs to be a mandatory training, right at the start of training camp every year. And the coaches and executives have to be involved.
But he says it's an important start in an uphill battle to change the culture. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
As climate change worsens and political turmoil continues around the world, Canada's supply of essential goods is under threat. That's led to the creation of an indoor vertical farm in Calgary. The company says it'll improve local food security. Brian Labby explains.
A tray of micropeas, one of the first crops to be harvested at Goodleaf Farms. The facility covers 100,000 square feet. The company wouldn't let us take pictures, fearing the competition would copy their setup.
We have created an environment where we provide the plants with exactly what they need at exactly the time they need it.
The plan is to produce 1 million kilograms of leafy vegetables a year. Agreements are already in place with major retailers, and the company says these homegrown veggies could reduce our reliance on imports.
We are creating an alternative, a domestic alternative, to deal with Canada's food sovereignty. But our intent is to be an option to replace imports.
Canada imports billions of dollars worth of veggies every year, most of it from the U.S. Experts say these vertical farms are sprouting up at a time when some U.S. producers are struggling.
The challenge down there is that they're facing droughts and reduced water availability for irrigation.
The City of Calgary's food systems planner says there are about a dozen indoor vertical farms in the city. It's part of a strategy to help maintain supply in the face of events like pandemics and shipping delays.
The ultimate goal is just how do we create a more resilient food system? And there are many ways that we can do that. The indoor food producers are one way.
Goodleaf says it has enough room at this location to double production, something that could happen in the next few years. Brian Labby, CBC News, Calgary.
A section of the Dempster Highway on the Yukon side is closed until further notice. It's shut down between Tombstone Territorial Park and Eagle Plains. That's because of 2 avalanches along the roadway. One slide is at kilometer 212 and the other is at kilometer 224. The Yukon Department of Highways and Public Works says crews are working to clear the road, but right now there's no timeline for when that might happen. You may not be driving on that section of the Dempster right now, but if your car still runs in this cold, chances are you'll be taking it around. Being able to drive in the winter is a skill many Canadians pride themselves on. Some are pros, some may not be as skilled as they think they are, and others are driving in the snow for the first time. For all of us, here's a driving instructor in Calgary with some tips.
Winter is a fact of life in Canada, but most of the people actually, even the people who are living in Calgary for long years, they cannot adjust the way of driving in the first day of snowing, and they end up with problems. And on the other hand, we have people coming from out of Canada who never seen the snow in their life, and they have no clue of how to manage this situation. They need to adapt the way how they are driving from the normal driving to the winter driving. First of all, when you start driving, you should apply the gas little by little because you expect that it was going to start skidding and spinning. So you should be very careful, you should be very slow. And the second thing, when you see that the car ahead of you start moving, you should not follow right away. You should leave more space and more time between your vehicle and the vehicle ahead of you. If you are driving and you are turning right or left, you start slowing down before you make the turn. Don't break through the turn. When you are slow enough to make your turn, start turning and don't push the gas until you finish your turn, then apply the gas again gently. Actually, winter tires is very helpful. It has more depth. And more importantly, I think the rubber itself is different. It has been made in a way it will hold and make the traction between the tire and the road itself. In winter time, we do recommend to have extra cloth, extra blanket, have all the time a jug of windshield wipers, have all the time a shovel so that you can prepare yourself just in case it happened, you went off the ditch or for some situation, there is no help beside you, there is no connection for your cell phone, at least you can keep yourself warm till help will approach you. If you have snow in the back and the rear window, how are we gonna melt it? There is a specific spot for that. You just hit it, it's a heater for the rear window. It's gonna clear your rear window and keep it available for you to see what you have behind you. The first day of snowing, every single year, we found 200 to 300 accidents. Why, right? People don't think that it is cold. They're gonna turn the engine on, heat in the cabin. When they get inside the car, they find it is warm, it's nice. Yes, it is warm, but the tires are still cold. And the roads are still cold. They don't have that enough traction. You need to be very, very slow until you create that heat with your tires, until you create that friction or the traction between the tires and the asphalt.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
We fought our way through Italy and then headed for Amsterdam, sweeping for Germans along the way. Our worst fear was to catch a bullet in these last hours of the war.
I was 15 when the Nazis invaded the Netherlands. More than 100,000 Dutch Jews never came home. Our men were put into forced labor. By 1945, we were starving. The food drops gave us hope. And then the Canadians came.
Before Amsterdam, I couldn't have explained why we were there, all those years away from home, but the Dutch showed us why it mattered.
Papa wanted me to bring some soldiers home to thank them personally. And that's when I first saw Wilf. And I invited him over that afternoon.
Marguerite Blaise married Lieutenant Wilf Gildersleeve. They moved to Vancouver, where they raised 8 children. Today, the Dutch still remember the Canadians who liberated them.
Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho!
What's wrong? The holly makes it look Christmassy.
I'm making some magic happen.
Moment of truth.
It's working!
Music. That's what always gives me a Christmas tingle.
This is your future.
I'm in love.
I challenge you! Everything ends in death.
Je m'appelle Brigitte. Je suis pas obéissante. Je suis piégée.
The Great Canadian Baking Show is back.
It's time to get whisked away into a magical 10.
Whisked away? I see what you did there. It has begun.
Alan, please don't start with a
Donut?
pun competition.
I got my eyes on the pies.
We are calling it iPhone.
Why would anybody want a phone without a keyboard?